Chapter 7. About my father's business. "Grandeur," my father said, his eyes upon mine, and I am certain he read my mind. "Beyond that curtain is indeed the rock upon which they found their faith, found their church, found this temple, but it is only physical grandeur. Their rock can be destroyed with a sledgehammer blow, and the faith of man deserves a firmer base. Truth is not founded upon such physical evidence. It need not be." As he talked, some strength and resolve flowed back into my weak knees, and my heart was less heavy in my breast. But as the days moved by, the hours were more and more filled with the overwhelming sense of the pressure of people. Tribes and men of every description milled about in the temple courtyards, packed themselves into a mass of shuffling people, and moved with unthinking acceptance the way they were directed. They, too, were overawed by the size and the color of the temple, stopped to marvel and tremble before the rock, that supposed physical evidence of the firm foundation of their faith. The activities were so arranged as to keep the masses moving much of the time, and the assistants and the priests pointed the way from the stage of one function to that of another. Imposing as the coming functions were, I began to have a sense of the complete futility of them. Surely men with intelligence would soon see through the show and the panoply to the rigid bone of an ancient belief. With the overwhelming sense of the pressure of people, tribes and men of every description milled about in the temple courtyards, packed themselves into. Surely men with intelligence would soon see through the show and the panoply to the rigid bone of an ancient belief. With the overwhelming, once vital and once alive. The first 2 days were the traditional days, and were the same as they had been for many, many years. Mother was greatly impressed, for the entire message was concerning the magnificence of God in keeping and caring for his chosen people. This theme was repeated over and over, in one place or in another, or in the prayers of the priests who thanked God for making the Jews a superior race. During the first 2 days, the Passover was eaten, the shajika, or festival sacrifice, was offered. Also, the first ripe barley was rushed into the temple. This was very theatrically done, for it was supposed to be devoted to the use of God, and be made into the omer of first flour and waved before the Lord. The ceremony seemed to me to be slightly foolish, for it was obvious that the barley had not been just to eat, but had in fact been kept outside the temple wall to be rushed in at the moment it fitted into the ceremony. This was to impress the onlookers that the first and best should be returned to the source from whence it came. Unconscious of their overweening pride and lack of God-fearing humility, the priests represented that God source from which all power and all things of nature came. They compared most unfavorably with the secret master of the Essenes, who refused all honor, all power, and all prestige. A new complication began bother me. My beautiful mother was constantly at my side. She whispered to me many interesting bits of information about the temple, and she pointed out certain of the high priests, but she would have interfered if I had attempted to involve the high priests. With her present, I dared not try. Many of the Essenes grew tired of following me about, decided I had lost my courage, and ceased to look upon me with either pride or compassion. Try as I would, I could not lose my mother, for she would command me to wait if I went ahead, and would wait if she went ahead of me. My father saw my difficulty, and I knew his resolve cost him a heart twinge. He knew that the only way I could have my chance was for him to take mother away, and he would then miss my attempt. At the end of the second day, he said, "Mary, we fulfilled our duty. The boy is registered, and we have seen this so many times. Let us come tomorrow for the first of the half-days, and then leave for the village the following day." Mother did not really want to do so, but carrying Mary A was not easy, and the children did complicate movement and attention. Thus it was that I rose early on the 4th day and slipped out of Bethany camp and made my way toward the temple alone. I knew that according to Talmudic tradition, the priests of the temple Sanhedrin sat as a court of appeal from the close of the morning to the time of the evening sacrifice. During the feast days, however, they followed the ancient tradition and came out upon the terrace of the court of priests to talk to the pilgrims and to teach them of the law and of behaviors seemly in the sight of the Lord. Since my mother had been at my elbow during my registration, this was my only chance at the high priests. Here was my chance, my only chance, and I had to take it. The terrace was in fact that portion of the court which was raised above the level of the common floor and set, apart by a row of flowers in pots, placed upon a knee-high stone barrier. There were also 2 parts to the lecture. The priest to give the lecture to the public was first honored by his colleagues and by learned doctors of law. He gave a scientific lecture carefully prepared with much research. This lecture was given behind the flowers, and if in hearing, was arrogantly assumed to be above the level of understanding of the common people. The very method seemed to me to be insufferably proud and a little stupid, for is not the purpose of the teacher to teach those who need learning, not those who have it? With arrogance, the priest discussed the same subjects again by moving to a seat at the border of the flowers and speaking to the common people. The formal talk was supposed to be carefully researched and put together with painstaking effort in order that it should be as accurate as the laws given by God, as they said. All common people were forbidden to question the priest, and these, ignorant of the fine points of the law, could not cross the flower hedge to sit upon the terrace, though it might be empty of priests. Fortunately, the high priest of the temple Sanhedrin was talking on this morning, and, since I was early, I got a seat upon a stone at the flowers. I could hear everything he said to his colleagues, and it was not very deep, though he quoted endlessly from the Pentateuch and Talmud. To support his thesis, he said, to know God is the only purpose of man's existence. However, he talked mainly in the general theme, unless we know God, how can we serve our fellow men? And did not cling to the central premise as any Essene would have done. His talk was nothing original, but he stated and proved from references that man must give all to God, obey the laws, do good always, turn to the priests for guidance. The priests then had the duty of directing men in the way of the Lord. When this shallow and presumptive talk was finished, the priest debated at length upon some very fine points of law. Then the high priest moved out to his seat and prepared to lecture the general public. Now, after a general lecture, it was supposed that anyone could ask any question he might desire. However, one had to be most careful, for it was easy to anger the priest. If the priest was offended, he who was guilty was an outcast from his own people. Thus, there could be nothing in the procedure that was original, and unless there was something original, how could I teach the high priests? When the priest had moved out, I looked upon the sea of faces of men and women seated on the stones of the court. I saw not one of our people, not a familiar Essene. Even Rabbi Borenshon, who had been so prominent at my registration and so boastful of my learning, was nowhere to be seen. But my mind was made up, and I would not turn back. I listened carefully while the priest talked about men's duty in small things and daily obedience, the need for attendance at the tabernacle, and that it was man's supreme duty to search for God, cling to the good, and forego sin. When his loud talk was finished, there was a period of simple questions easily answered. But without support from my friends, I still had to make my attempt. I swallowed hard and asked a calculated but apparently simple question. The high priest's first reaction was to laugh, and this relieved me, for I knew he did not detect my deliberate trap. Thus, spurred with a little courage from a little success, I felt better. Sir, what is sin? Oh, my little redhead, such a question! At your age, has not your mother taught you the meaning of sin? He was expansive and good-natured, and I said, Sir, she has tried, but she fails in consistency. She tells me that doubting the word of a rabbi is sin. Is it a sin to doubt? Not to doubt, but it is a sin to doubt the servant of God. Oh, sir, have I indeed sinned just now, since I doubted you and your conclusion to your lecture to the priests on the terrace? That could be mere disagreement, my son. In what way did you disagree with my conclusion? Sir, before your conclusion in your secondary thesis, you said, man must know God to be able to serve his fellow man. I wondered if it were not more important that man should serve his fellow man in humility and kindness in order that he could come to know God. Did I sin in wondering and doubting your word? No, son. Well, no. I doubted you and did not sin? No, son, no. Then doubting even a high priest is not a sin. Oh, please, sir, tell me what is sin. Well, stealing is a sin. The entire crowd was inching forward upon the stones and straining to hear and silencing anyone who dared breathe loudly or scuff a stone. Oh, sir, I am sorry that I do not understand. If I take and eat the sacrifice, do I sin? Yes, you certainly do. Would all of my offspring live in sin thereafter? Oh, yes, indeed. Then, do the Jews live in sin in shadow of such a theft? No. but the ancestor of our race took and ate the sacrifice when he wanted food. Yes, but that is different. Sir, then sometimes stealing is not a sin? There are exceptions? Oh, this is what puzzles me. Is there no sin that has no exceptions? The high priest turned in his chair and looked at me with knotted brows. For a moment, I thought he would like to shatter me with a blow. Incest is a sin. Adultery is a sin. Oh, yes, sir. My mother has said as much. Yet is it not true that one of our greatest ancestors lay with his own daughters in both adultery and incest? Yet we reverence him as the great founder of our race. Beads of perspiration began to form on his forehead, and his smile was very tight, and his lips were set and thin above his long beard. You have taken special exception in each case, son. Sir, forgive me, but is there no case to which some exception may not be taken? Apparently not, son. The crowd roared with laughter at that, and I pretended to be embarrassed. Sir, you joke with me. Would it be impertinent for me to show from your own words spoken out on the terrace that there is one case, and one case only? From my words? The sentence was jerked from him in surprise, but took it as an invitation to proceed. Oh, you want me to recall them to your mind? Yes, of course. Sir, in the Kala, that is in your careful scientific discussion to the priests, you said, to know God is the sole purpose of man's existence. Sin? Yes. But what has that to do with? But, sir, is the statement true? Yes. But what has that to do with? Sin? Yes. But what has that to do with? But, sir, is the statement true? Of course it is true. Do others agree? Will your other priests agree to this statement that it is true? I was hoping by this method to involve them in a discussion, and it worked. Some 30 priests and doctors of law came to the hedge and stood looking down upon me. They agreed that knowing God was the purpose of man's life. I turned back to the high priest. Sir, your thought seems to be accepted as wisdom. I rose and walked to the puzzled and almost angry priest and stopped at his knees. I want to thank you for helping me with my puzzles and making me see so clearly. Is not that a sin, and that only, which causes any man to miss in his attempt to make connection with his God? I waited until the murmurs of approval died down and the priests had ceased to comment among themselves. Sir, are there any exceptions to this definition? I turned toward the other priests. Good sirs, have I not restated his own conclusions correctly, but in my own words? Is there an exception to this definition of sin? The high priest looked with some concern at the faces of the other priests, but no one spoke, and he relaxed and put his hand upon my shoulders. Manachi, I say he has carried your own thinking to a higher level. What say you? The high priest, Reuben Manachi, patted my head and said with great tolerance, I say that he is indeed a bright young man. I would talk with him further, but it is time for morning sacrifice. I shall be busy until the evening sacrifice. Also tonight with Roman authorities. Take him to Uffel for the night. Find from whence he came. Locate his rabbi that we may learn if this wisdom is of God or devil. Tomorrow we will meet with him and his rabbi, and we shall all test him. He is clever and of good deportment. Sometimes the wisdom of the Lord flows from the mouths of babes. Rabbi Manachi rose to leave, then stopped and said to the group of young priests, Let the great Sanhedrin know. Tell Hillel and also tell Shammai of this amazing child and invite them to come tomorrow to guide our formal questioning. And Gamaliel, treat this child with more than your usual rigorous courtesy, lest you offend the Lord and me. When he turned away, a short, dark-faced priest of about 20 to 5 years took me over firmly by the hand and led me toward the tunnels which led to Ophel, or the priest houses. But the old priest came along, he who had been talking with me. We passed through the tunnel. In about 50 strides we came into an open court, very long, along the sides of which there arose the apartments of the priests. I was hurried directly to the apartment of Gamaliel. He was fierce and forceful, but a careful, correct priest who spoke with some authority to his fellow priests, all who had accompanied us. Someone must let Hillel know that a prodigy has been found. Who wants to go and deliver the invitation to the president of the great Sanhedrin? Fine, you go, but don't be surprised if the liberal old fool falls upon his knees and thanks God for sending the Messiah to liberate us." There was humor in his voice, tinged with a bitter mockery that made it furious. I felt the undercurrent of struggle in him and in the group. One said, "You should not speak disrespectfully of the president of the great Sanhedrin. No matter what his power now, soon he will be set aside by the growing power of Shammai." That traditionalist, he is so rigorous in his interpretation of the laws that he feels that the laws delivered by God should not be changed to meet the changing conditions of man. Ha! He's a smart scribe, but he is only vice president of the great Sanhedrin. He will be more. Wait and see. There was comradeship and teasing in the words and the manner of the priests, but there quite obviously was an equal and serious tension, which indicated the friction into which I was caught. The departing priest turned to me and spoke, and I could tell he was deadly serious. "Lad, pray that you are questioned by Hillel, not by the scribe Shammai. Shammai cannot believe that anyone who is not a scribe can know anything about the laws of God. And if he has some knowledge, it must be because he was taught by the devil." Gamaliel turned to me and snapped, "A question, boy. Were you taught by the devil?" I looked up into his set, fiery, mean eyes. "Sir, you offend my teachers, Rabbi Boranchan, my mother and my father. They taught me in the tradition of the faith as taught to them by you priests." As the tedious day wore on, I found out much about Shammai, the scribe, and about Hillel. Shammai was trying to oust the liberal priest from power. There was much secrecy and much infighting on the part of the scribe. For the liberal, Hillel wanted to bring the law of God to man in terms of man's understanding, not as adamant and inflexible rules of conduct. A legalist, Shammai was anti-humanitarian and fought with treacherousness and tenacity, brutality and mercilessness. He was all the more frustrated because Hillel seemed to hold him in check without effort and without hatred or force. Gamaliel turned to a priest. "Go find the Rabbi Boranchan of this village called Nazar. See that he comes tomorrow at the command of the great Sanhedrin, and get from him a report on this Joseph Bar Joseph, which shall be for my ears alone." "For your ears alone, Gamaliel, until you can rush over and report it to Shammai, eh?" We had a meal of over-rich food late in the afternoon. I was soon tired of the narrow, strife-filled minds of the priests. When the meal was finished, I laid back upon a pallet of thick carpets and promptly went to sleep. Inactivity was strange to me, and boredom was something entirely new. The food was too heavy, and indeed the day had been a strain. Sometime during the night I was covered with a fine, light fur robe against the night chill, but did not fully awaken until almost the first light of the 19th day of Nisan, the 5th day of the feast of the Passover. Soon I was bathed in a tiled tub, and we had a breakfast that was again too heavy and grease-filled. As I ate, I longed for the robust taste of the baked barley cake and the feel of hard milk curds and good fruit. But the queasiness in my stomach may have been because I was tense and nervous, for I faced a rough trial, a fact that Gamaliel called to my mind quite often with a gloating manner and threat in his voice. We hurried to the meeting. I first saw Shammai, the scribe. He was a short, thin man with sallow skin and sharp features, and there was a small ring of black hair upon his head, and it seemed to support his bald pate. His eyes were brilliant, perhaps too prominent and too brilliant. I also saw the great teacher, Hillel. He was tall and gaunt, yet he seemed expansive, and would be said to be big. His face was high in color, near to florid, and his gray and brown beard was as wide as his massive chest. His hair was like a shock of sun-darkened wheat upon his head, and he seemed to have a radiance that was like a halo. His eyes were wide-spaced, and strangely like my father's. Before him stood the short, nearly cringing figure of Rabbi Boranchan, but the eyes of the master teacher seemed to be focused through and beyond the rabbi's head. "I have taught him with care, and his mother is a most devout woman. If the devil has invaded him, it is certainly of recent time." Boranchan said this in a tight voice. My test began in a formal manner, but I could feel the thoughts of hatred and frustrations shooting from Shammai toward Hillel. The president of the great Sanhedrin sat as if wrapped in impenetrable spiritual armor, holding all the world in the spell of his expanding love. Only a false man could have failed to return his outpouring of love, and it was obvious from their auras that Shammai and Gamaliel were hurt by his very benevolence. They swung upon me with a battery of questions which were unkind. They asked them in such a way that the answers would have had to be tarnished by acceptance of a black belief. Such questions as, when did you first know that the devil was in you? In the beginning, did you resist the devil, or did you let him have his way without a fight? What is the law of the devil? When they first started asking such unfair and prejudiced questions, I did not answer, and they grew almost gleeful, as if they were having a great success at my expense. At last, growing tired of such juvenile and unfair questions, I decided to bring them to a stand, for it was apparent that they had cowed the other priests and doctors, all except Hillel and the young priest who stood up to Gamaliel, whose name I found years later to be Nicodemus. I could expect no champions, so I said suddenly, Sirs Shammai, Gamaliel, you have asked many questions to indicate that you know much about the devil and his works. If God occupied your thoughts as he should in your position, could you then be so preoccupied with the devil? Both men gasped, and a flurry of comment went among the 100 or more priests and doctors. I looked out into the court, but among the many persons that were sitting on the stones, I saw no Essenes except about 75 dressed in the blue robes and hoods of the probationary step. It seemed useless anyway, this attempt to best the great minds, so I threw all caution to the sky and said, Sirs, do you consider your questions either dignified or fair? Are you asking me to answer questions that are nothing but a trap? Questions so worded that a simple statement will not suffice, and an hour's dissertation would be wasteful of your time and mine. Are not your questions designed to trap and discredit me and my teachers? Would I not need a learned champion to answer you? Since I have never known anything or thought upon the works of the devil, may I conclude that you have? I am a farmer's boy, and have heard the saying, how can that cow be with calf who's never known a bull? I faced them firmly with defiance. May I know, sirs, do you wish to test me fairly or defeat me by any means? Do you strive against me to increase your prestige in the great Sanhedrin? For a moment there was a deadly hush, setting on top of indrawn breath. Then President Hillel began to laugh, loud and joyous. The terrible tension was broken, and the priest joined in a gale of laughter, and at long last my two antagonists began to laugh. Hillel reached out and placed me on his ample knee. Ho, this is indeed a Jewish Roman candle. He lights up like a sky exploding. But son, you must learn to control that waspish tongue. These learned priests have done you a favor. They have deliberately been the devil's advocate to provoke out of you the truth. Have they not proved to all gentlemen that his knowledge comes not from the devil? Therefore, we may proceed on the assumption that it comes either from man or God. He shook me gently. Now that this is established, shall we talk together as friends? Sirs, I turned toward the two priests. I was taught to turn the second cheek before striking my offenders. I pray you forgive me, for I was indeed not wise enough to see that you are my friends in disguise, not foes of my welfare, for your friendship and help. I thank you. A wry smile came upon their faces, but they came near me and were neutral, if not kind. We talked then at length of the law, and of the symbols by which the law may be taught to common man, and of means by which young men, such as myself, could be encouraged to learn. As we talked, the greater doctors asked me fair questions. I was able to answer them sometimes rather well, and they seemed to be pleased, and it became obvious that I was to be successful in my trial. Rabbi Borenchin came forward to stand beside me. When he saw that the men of the great Sanhedrin approved of me, he began to expand, smile, and nod his head. I loved the man, the benevolent and unlearned rabbi, and was secretly pleased to see his eyes glaze when I gradually raised the discussion to the higher principles of harmonic law. Soon I was talking to the listening priests on the relationship of physical laws as the disciplines or stepping stones by which man could reach the spiritual laws, above doctrine, above creed, above temple, above church. I saw my mother hurry into the court, her beautiful face pale and distraught. When her eyes met mine, relief flooded her face, and she hurried over to the border of flowers. But there, true to the training and tradition, she stopped, daring not to come inside the border. She stood in some agitation until those behind her caused her to sit upon the stones so they could hear and see. Soon I forgot her and all else, for the great teacher, Hillel, had carried the discussion into the finest realms of my knowledge. He was so like my father, so insistent, yet so patient, so wise, yet so humble. and love spilled out upon all, enveloping me and lulling me, and it was apparent that only Hillel understood the metaphysical principles of the law. At last he asked me a question that stopped me, and for which I could not immediately think of an answer. As I stood in meditation, I felt 2 rays of blue-white light strike me in the forehead. One came from somewhere beyond the border in the midst of the court, and the other from the forehead of Hillel himself. Suddenly, as if borne up into another level of consciousness, I knew the answer. "Sirs," you asked, "what is the very highest principle of the law? Is it not that it releases and makes free, and is not in any way a binding force? It may be that law in the physical level may bind man and make him an unwitting and unwilling prisoner to culture and social mores. It may circumscribe his actions and even his morals, but at the spiritual level, when properly understood, he who obeys the law is above all control. He is above cultural and social mores. He is truly above all the controllable actions and morals. Though he is neither unwittingly a prisoner nor unwilling to perform the law, he has risen above all law to infinite freedom. Has he not become totally spiritual? Can that which is spiritual be controlled by physical laws?" There was a long hush, and then the most astonishing thing happened. From beyond the flower border there was the sound of hands clapping, and soon the priests and the doctors were applauding too. I was deeply pleased, but then blushed, for I was certain that Hillel could read my thoughts, even as my father could. I thought perhaps I had succeeded, but when I looked into the court I was dismayed. For in all the space there were no Essenes except those of the lower order. There seemed to be no one who might know and report my success to my brothers. Therefore, my chance of becoming a teacher was almost gone, and I was sad in heart. At last the great Sanhedrin was satisfied, and Hillel rose and led me to the teacher's chair. There he stood me upon the seat and turned to the group in the court. "Behold Joseph bar Joseph from the village of Nazar. He is a student of the synagogue and also an Essene. We find him rich in knowledge and wise, able to make intuitive connection between ideas and facts, and to reason in the difficult realm of abstraction. In him we are well pleased." The great teacher stopped and waited for several seconds. I saw in the far court several of my brothers in white dress and without hoods. The space there were no Essenes except those of the lower order. There seemed to be no one who might know and report my success to my brothers. The great teacher stopped and waited for several seconds. I saw in the far court several of my brothers in white dress and without hoods. They leaped, then fell, came slowly into the space came slowly into the court. My heart leaped, then fell, for it was clear that they were all too late. They could not now see my effectiveness and judge for themselves whether or not I had indeed taught the priests. I found Hillel looking down upon me in a most understanding way, and I'm sure he read my mind. For that great teacher stepped to the fore and spoke again as if he said his message to the heads of my brothers especially. "Let us say that he has been most excellently tested, except that his red hair set fire to his tongue. We find him most pleasant." He edged forward and raised his voice as if to be certain that the Essenes heard him clearly. "Let it be known that he has taught us at the great Sanhedrin and taught us well. Let it be said that this proves that the great truth of God is not written in scroll or found in temple, synagogue, or in a body of highly trained men. It is found only within a just, upright heart." The great Hillel turned to the priests and doctors. "Do you not agree that he has taught us of these things pleasantly and well?" There was a chorus of agreement, and the great Sanhedrin broke up to carry out the duties of the temple and the morning sacrifice. My beautiful mother came to me quickly, tears streaming down her face, and she was both laughing and crying as she swept me into her embrace. "Oh, Jeshua, how you have dealt with us! Your father has long since come back looking for you. We hunted for you with all the company, and when you were not found, we hurried back to the temple in concern. I was afraid something had happened to you." I put my arms around her and kissed her gently. "Why would you worry about me, Mother? Wouldn't you know I would be with you or going about my father's business?" How strange was the thing that happened next! If subsequent events had not proved the tightness of my sensitivity, I would not dare report what happened. How foolish it seems to write, I thought, yet this is what happened. One of the novices came near to us. He was tall, even as my father, and his entire face was hidden by the hood which some novices wore. His side was turned to us, his left side, and he stood about 10 feet from Mother and me and somewhat closer to Hillel. He stopped and stood very still. Someone bumped him, and he did not sway. Then there seemed to rise from his head a blue-white light. I watched it grow in intensity until, like a spiritual serpent, it struck across the distance and touched the head of the president of the great Sanhedrin. Hillel was speaking to many people and smiling, but he turned away from them and stood straight and very, very still. A new light of great delight came into his eyes, and he looked at me with a sudden and different awareness. He seemed to think for a few seconds, then closed his eyes and stood very still and completely unmoving. A silver-violet thread leaped from his head to that of the novice. I saw the pulsing ties, like two spiritual ropes running between the two men, binding them into a single unit of supreme understanding. I saw and I knew that they exchanged knowledge, and that the exchange was caused by and concerned me. Quietly, the great teacher opened his eyes, saw me looking at him, and smiled. The novice moved without looking back. He even walked somewhat like my father. Hillel came purposefully toward me and talked to my beautiful mother, even with the duties of the temple clamoring for his time, about my possible future studies. Mother, of course, asked about the possibility of my entering the training of a rabbi. The great teacher encouraged the thought. Then he added, "In the reaches of the desire, there is sometimes the thought in every advanced mind and soul that he may be selected to work for a mystical brotherhood, or that he may be of the order of Melchizedek. If such mystical things were true, they alone would be better training than that which is needed for the priesthood." My mother paid no attention to the words he said, for he said them with an apparent humor. But I heard them as a man dying of thirst hears the bubbling of water. He saw the look upon my face, and his eyes signaled for me to be silent, and his lips talked evenly of other things. Soon he was gone out of my sight and hearing, but not out of my life. For to me, he would ever be the living, walking, laughing symbol of love. I was to hear many times in my training one of his maxims, "Do not unto others that which is hateful unto you." But, with all his openness and love, at least on the physical level, I had noted a mystery about him. How marvelous was his understanding that he could conquer with love. But what of the strange intertwining of thought messages between him and the novice concerning me? Mother was most anxious to depart from the temple, and we hurried toward the Bethany camp. Though she scolded me gently for worrying her, her eyes told me how proud she was, and also of a new height of that more than human adoration that worried and confused me. We reached Bethany after the company had gone ahead toward the first camp, which was on the Jordan, about 7 miles beyond Jericho. It was a long march for one day, but they had left us the 2 largest mules, and we rode swiftly, even through the hot afternoon, and caught them in camp well before sundown. John, Jim, Jojo, Mary B. and Father were waiting the meal for us, and my ears burned with the glowing reports that Mother gave of how Hillel had treated us because of me. The youngsters were excited that their brother should dare to talk to the high priest, and by nightfall had spread the tale through the augmented company. But not a brother of the Essenes came to talk with me, and I could tell nothing from my father's inscrutable face. Therefore, in deep sadness, I concluded that I had failed, insofar as they knew, to pass my trial. And in my heart I was bitter, for indeed Hillel had said that I had taught the priests in the hearing of my brothers, and they had joined the company by sundown, but had not even spoken of me. We started first light the next morning and passed the point of East Mount Sariaba, where the Jabbok River of Perea comes into the Jordan, well before midday. We rested for a time and pushed on to make camp near the Jordan before the great heat of the afternoon. The next day was a short, easy march to the well of Barson. My exploits in the temple were forgotten as many came to remind Mother of her promise to tell more about the miracles in the woman of our village. Excitement grew in the augmenting group from Cana and the new Roman town of Tiberias and Jotapata, Magdala, and as far north as Chorazin, Capernaum, and even Gishala. They all decided to make a short day in their march to stay and hear Mother's story, which concerned the promised Messiah. And verily it was a huge group that crowded close upon the earth between the campfires near the well when the night shadows began to settle across the wilderness. When Mother came to the well for her night pitcher of water, a chorus of voices urged her to hurry and begin her story. She carefully filled the pitcher and placed it at my knee, as if to hold me to the spot. 100 men offered to lift her to the stones beside the well, while she was so slender and light that I might have done it myself. She stood straight, slender, and beautiful in the firelight, and there was a strange and piteous smile upon her face, and tears, yes, tears in her eyes. Many times she looked at me, almost in doubt or fear. But at last she threw back her shoulders and began her story. It was that very story which was to change my destiny. Beloved friends and comrades of the journey, the time has come to make known to the world that which cannot longer be hidden. The Scriptures have foretold the coming of the Messiah, the Redeemer of men. You all await his coming, do you not? Then listen to my story well. I know that the long-awaited Messiah has been born to man. The Scriptures have already been fulfilled, and there is come, out of the house of David, the Son of God.